consists largely of myths and legends, and they arise to a great extent from spiritual beliefs, mythology, legends, and history, because some of them are told not as stories but as history. And one creation myth, otherwise known as myths of origin. And here, in these myths, there's an attempt to explain something in the cosmology, explain why something is as it is. And we will take a look at one of these to be told by Shanshani Mujibur. Okay, and we just look at two more types, and one is the trickster tradition. And the trickster tradition is very common among folk tales, and particularly among Caribbean folk tales. We find that it is widespread across different types of tales, wherever they come from. And the best known trickster character is Anansi. There's another character who in the trickster tradition, which is Balgobin. And some of these tales, the Balgobin tales and Anansi stories, are actually trickster tales. But what we'll find sometimes in some of the trickster tradition tales from other countries is that they also contain a moral. They also contain the elements of a fable because they teach lessons. Take a look at one of these, told by Rosalie Seymour.
The Pancha is a legendary collection of short stories from India, originally composed in the 2nd century BC by Vishnu. The purpose behind the compositions was to implant moral values and governing skills in the young sons who worked hard to make these fables accessible to all. The story I'm about to read falls under the trickster tradition, yet it can still be considered a fable because it has a moral behind it. The Brahmin's Gate. Once there lived a pious Brahmin in a small village by the name of Mitra Sharma. He used to perform religious rituals. On one occasion, he was rewarded with a goat for his services by a wealthy man. The Brahmin was happy to get a goat as the reward. He happily slung the goat over his shoulder and began his journey towards home. On the way, 3 chiefs saw the Brahmin taking the goat. All of them were lazy and wanted to cheat the Brahmin so that they could take away the goat. They said, "This goat would make a delicious meal for all of us. Let's get it somehow." They discussed the matter amongst themselves, and devised a plan to get the gold by fooling the Brahmin. After deciding the plan, they got separated from one another and took different hiding positions at 3 different places on the way of the Brahmin. As soon as the Brahmin arrived at a lonely place, one of the chiefs came out of his hiding place and asked the Brahmin in a shocking manner, "Sir, what are you doing? I don't understand why a pious man like you needs to carry a dog on his shoulders." The Brahmin was surprised to hear such words. He screamed, "Can't you see it's not a dog, but a goat, you stupid fool?" The chief replied, "Sir, I beg your pardon. I told you what I saw. I'm sorry if you don't believe." The Brahmin was annoyed at the discrepancy, but he continued his journey once again. He had barely walked a distance when another chief came out of his hiding place and asked the Brahmin, "Sir, why do you carry a dead calf on your shoulders? You seem to be a wise person. Such an act is pure stupidity on your part." The Brahmin yelled, "What? How could you mistake a living goat for a dead calf?" The second chief replied, "Sir, you seem to be highly mistaken in this regard. Either you don't know what a goat looks like, or you're doing it knowingly. I just told you what you saw. Thank you." The second chief went away smiling. The Brahmin got confused, but continued to walk further. Again, he had covered a little distance, but the third chief met him. The third chief said laughingly, "Sir, why do you carry a donkey on your shoulders? It makes you a laughing stock." Hearing the words of the third dog, the Brahmin became really worried. He started thinking, is it really not a goat? Is it something of a ghost? He thought that the animal he was carrying on his shoulders might really be some sort of a ghost, because it transformed itself from a goat into a dog, from a dog into a dead calf, and from a dead calf into a donkey. He got so frightened that he heard the goat on the roadside and ran away. The 3 tricksters laughed at the gullible Brahmin. They caught the goat and were happy.
Is one of the again in the tradition of the moral and the fable, and the kind of stories that are meant to teach something, and it comes from the African tradition, and the African tradition is one of the very strong contributors to the folk tale tradition that now exists in the Caribbean. And this one will be told by Chandrani Brijnal.
Folktales from Africa are a major part of African oral literature and were traditionally passed down by word of mouth. Often they were told by the light of the moon around the village fire after the completion of a long day of work. Usually the stories taught a lesson, and frequently the selfish person learned the lesson the hard way. These are examples of fables or morals. This is a story from the Igbo tribe of Nigeria. 2 sisters and a gold mine. A long time ago in a little village, there lived a man who had 2 wives and 2 daughters. 1 daughter from each wife. Missy was the daughter of the first wife and was only a few months older than the second wife's daughter, Ranti. The family lived together in the same compound, so the girls often played together. But Missy was fond of bullying her younger half-sister, just like her mom was fond of being mean to Ranti's mother. Ranti would go crying to her mother, and sometimes she would tell her mother how she wished to heard Missy just like Missy had heard her. But her mother would tell her, "Never give bad in return for bad. Nothing good comes of that." So Ranti remained good and continued to show love in return, no matter what Missy did to her. One cloudy day, Ranti's mother passed away after a brief illness. Without her mother around, it did not take long for Missy to crank up her level of meanness towards Ranti. Soon, Ranti was doing all of Missy's chores, while Missy just lazed around, dressed up, ate, slept, or visited friends. Ranti would wake up early in the morning before the cocks crow, place a large clay water pitcher on her head while carrying another in her arms, and walk to the river to fetch water for the family's use. It required several trips back and forth before the huge water pot in the compound was filled. Then she would sweep the compound with a broom made of dry palm fronds before peeling yams for breakfast. Her list of chores stretched out until dusk, by which time she would be exhausted and just collapse to sleep on her raffia mat. She was too busy to even feel sorry for herself, and every day this process was repeated. One morning, as she made her daily trip to the river, she saw an old man sitting by the river bank. He appeared to be covered in sores, and he looked really pitiful. Ranti went to meet him. "Baba, are you alright? Can I get you anything?" she asked. He wanted some water, which she gave to him. Then she washed his sores. "My child, you have a wonderful heart, and you deserve wonderful things," he told her. He directed her to go to a garden just beyond the river. He told her she would find 2 trees there, one with golden fruit, which she was not to touch, and the other one with rotten fruit. He told her to take one of the rotten fruits home, and once she gets home, she should break open the fruit. She did as the old man instructed. When she broke the fruit, riches beyond her wildest imagination appeared, filling every inch of her bedroom. When Bisi discovered this, she insisted that Ranti tell her where she got the richness from. The following morning, after several cocks crowed, Bisi got up from bed. She hoped the old man would still be at the river, as she picked up a pitcher and headed to the river. Luckily for her, he was there, looking exactly as Ranti had described him. She went to him and asked, "Baba, which way to the magic garden?" The old man showed her, and he also told her to pick the rotten fruit, not the golden one. Bisi dumped her pitcher and headed to the garden. She saw the tree with the rotten fruit and the one with the golden fruit, and she said to herself, "That old man must think I'm stupid. These golden fruits are mine." She picked a couple of golden fruits, as many as she could carry in her hands, and went on her way. When she got home, she went into her bedroom and closed her door, as she did not want anyone stumbling to discover her richness. She threw the fruits hard on the floor to break them, but instead of richness, snakes, worms, rodents, and all manners of horrible things appeared. The moral of this folk tale is good triumphs over evil, and good thing comes to those who wait.
There we had Rosalie C. Paul and Chandrani Bridgelal, who are students of oral literature at the University of Guyana. And of course, we had Al Crichton, who gave us a bit about the storytelling traditions across the world. We have coming up now who has long endeared himself to us here in Guyana. And we know him from the programs he does on television and the He produces 2 television programs, Oral Tradition and Between the Lines on the National Communication Network, and he writes 2 weekly columns, Preserving Our Literary Heritage for the Sunday Chronicle and The Shaping of Guyanese Literature for the Sunday Guyana Times. He's been the editor of the Guyana Annual since 2004. He's going to tell us, I think, something about Bangalan. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Pitamber Versa, historian, writer, columnist, and events coordinator. Thank you.
The introduction is just to reinforce what has gone on before in the last couple of minutes. When last you sit down and hear good old-time story, like Nancy's story, like Balgobin's story. When last you sit down and hear old time story like Jumbie's story, or like Fire-As, Moongazer, Jubilee Bill, Fairmaid, Water Baby. When last you sit down round the fireside, round the artificial hearth with electric fire. When last you sit down by the bedside and talk old time story? When last you sit down on the sea wall and talk about Mormon? When last you sit down by the Blackwater Church and talk about the Massaculo man? When last? When last you sit down under the silk cotton tree, the calabash tree, the tamarind tree? When last you sit down in the hammock? When last you sit down in a hammock and talk holy? When last you sit down in the Umanayana and listen to some good old time story? When last you hear long, long, long time ago? When last you hear the tinning Ben and the story end? I'm just beginning. I'm just beginning. All this is by way of introducing a little known character in the folklore of Guyanese of Indian ancestry, Balgobin. Now, if we do not tell these stories over and over, there is a danger that they may fade out. I've taken the liberty, you know, a storyteller must have props, a touchstone. I've taken the liberty to work with a couple of props. The Balgobin Saga by yours truly. The first concerted effort to capture these Balgobin stories, and a DVD, The Legend of Balgobin, which was produced by the Center for Communication Studies of the University of Guyana, a 40-minute docudrama. The book you can get online or directly from the publisher, ANSIP Publishing. The DVD you can get from the Center for Communication Study, University of Guyana. These two props show the shifting patterns of communication, storytelling, orality, the printed word, audio, visual. The stories are humorous anecdotes, stories about Balgobin. But the book is written in such a way, it's designed in such a way that it tells the story of the early indentured Indians, how they were able to deal with the trauma of displacement, how they were able to use storytelling to deal with the trauma of storytelling. And the book is in parts like in and around the church, in and around the sugar plantation, in and around the school, in and around the back dam. Many of the stories come from a school setting. You know, years ago we had, who can remember? Years ago we had the school inspector. Do we still have school inspectors now? Well, the role of the school inspector then was to ensure that they keep the teacher in line, not necessarily the student. But every so often, the teachers are tested through the stories. Some of these stories are from the classroom. And in those days, you remember the 3 R's also, reading, writing, and arithmetic. We do many more subjects now. One day, the teacher asked the class to write a story about a pet. The following day, she was reading these stories out to the class. She happened to notice that the story presented by Balgobin was similar to one she just read. So she asked Balgobin, explain this, you copy for me. You copy the student's essay. Balgobin said, no teacher. My brother and me write about the same pen. So it looked like the same story. The Indians were situated in the bongyard. That's before the end of indentureship. And then they moved to the free yard and then to the nuclear housing scheme. One day the inspector said to Balgobin, could you spell the thing you sleep on? But Balgobin was not such a brilliant character. But he started well. He said, B, and students in the class said, go, Balgobin, go. Go, Balgobin, go. Balgobin continued bravely. A. He said, no, Balgobin, because they didn't know where he was coming from. B, A. Another loud shout, no, Balgobin. Balgobin fed up with this thing. He just shouted out, B-A-A-G. No, there's no explanation. I hear you laugh about B-A-A-G or B-A-G, bag, he sleeps in a bag. In the arithmetic class, the teacher threw out the equation to the children. If there were 10 sheep on this side of the fence and one jumps over the fence, how many remain? And she selected one of the bright students because the student inspector was watching. And the student said, 9, teacher, 9. She said, no. Not correct. Sorry about that. Misleading you. Bhagavan said, no, that's not correct. And he turned to the teacher who was questioning. And she asked for an explanation. And she said to the teacher and the class, Tisha, you ain't no sheep for truth. If one jump over, I'll go back. And in closing, Balagoben, as I said, was not that bright, so he did not get the scholarship to go to a foreign lands study. His friend did. His friend returned with a BA, and he was boasting how he took 5 long years in America to get his BA. Gavin said, me sister stand right here. And in 9 months, she get a BA. The friend was not annoyed or put out. So he decided to treat Balgobin to some food, restaurant food. He took him to this place, this fancy, nice fancy place, OMG, sorry, OMG. So Balgobin, you, Agamon, you are the ending. And Balgobin started to fry rice, to chicken in the rock. And Balgobin then come at a rate free food, you know. So the friend, this brilliant friend who returned with his BA, said, Balgobin, you want to get talik? Balgobin said, bring 2 of them. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have there Pitambar Prasad and Balgobin Stories. This afternoon, of course, it's World Storytelling Day, and today we're going to be hearing stories from all across the world. The young lady we're going to listen to now works with the Public Affairs Department of the U.S. Embassy in Georgetown. She's been serving in Guyana for 1.5 years in this capacity. She was based in Washington prior to coming to Guyana, where she worked as a Columbia desk officer. She studied diplomacy and international relations, and she has an undergraduate degree from Seton Hall University and a master's degree from George Washington University. Ladies and gentlemen, to read from the work of Frank R. Stockton, please let me invite on stage Tabitha Fairclough.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm going to read a story today. It's called The Lady or the Tiger, and it's by Frank Stockton. Mr. Stockton was an American writer and humorist, best known today for a series of innovative children's fairy tales that were very popular during the last decades of the 19th century. The Lady or the Tiger. In the very olden time, there lived a semi-barbaric king whose ideas, though somewhat polished and sharpened by the progressive neighbors, were still large, florid, and untrammeled, as became the half of him which was barbaric. He was a man of exuberant fancy, and withal of an authority so irresistible that at his will he turned his varied fancies into facts. He was greatly given to self-communing, and when he and himself agreed upon anything, the thing was. When every member of his domestic and political systems moved smoothly in its appointed course, his nature was bland and genial. But whenever there was a little hitch and some of his orbs got out of their orbits, he was blander and more genial still. For nothing pleased him so much as to make the crooked straight and crush down uneven places. Among the borrowed notions by which his barbarism had become semified was that of the public arena, in which by exhibitions of manly and beastly valor, the minds of his subjects were refined and cultured. But even here the exuberant and barbaric fancy asserted itself. The arena of the king was built, not to give the people an opportunity of hearing the rhapsodies of dying gladiators, nor to enable them to view the inevitable conclusion of a conflict between religious opinions and hungry jaws, but for purposes far better adapted to widen and develop the mental energies of the people. This vast amphitheater with its encircling galleries, its mysterious vaults and its unseen passages, was an agent of poetic justice, in which crime was punished or virtue rewarded by the decrees of an impartial and incorruptible chain. When the subject was accused of a crime of sufficient importance to interest the king, public notice was given that on an appointed day the fate of the accused person would be decided in the king's which well deserved its name. For although its form and plan were borrowed from far, its purpose emanated solely from the brain of this man, who every barley-corn king knew no tradition to which he owed more allegiance than pleased his fancy, and who engrafted on every adopted form of human thought and action the rich growth of his barbaric idealism. When all the people had assembled in the galleries, and the king, surrounded by his court, sat high up on his throne of royal state on one side of the arena, he gave a signal, and a door beneath him opened, and the accused subject stepped out into the amphitheater. Directly opposite of him, on the other side of the enclosed space, were two doors exactly alike side by side. It was the duty and the privilege of the person on trial to walk directly to these doors and open one of them. He could open either door he pleased. He was subject to no guidance or influence but that of the aforementioned and incorruptible chance. If he opened the one, there came out of it a hungry tiger, the fiercest and most cruel that could be procured, which immediately sprang upon him and tore him to pieces as the punishment for his guilt. The moment that the case of the criminal was thus decided, doleful iron bells were clanged, great wails went up from the hired mourners posted on the outer rim of the arena, and the vast audience with bowed heads and downcast hearts wended slowly their way homeward, mourning greatly that one so young and so fair, or so old and respected, should have merited so dire a fate. But if the accused person opened the other door, there came forth from it a lady, most suitable to his years and station that his majesty could select among his fair subjects, and to this lady he was immediately married as a reward of his innocence. It mattered not that he might already possess a wife and family, or that his affections might be engaged upon an object of his own selection. The king allowed no such subordinate arrangements to interfere with his great scheme of retribution and reward. The exercises, as in the other instance, took place immediately and in the arena. Another door opened beneath the king, and a priest, followed by a band of choristers and dancing maidens blowing joyous airs on golden horns and treading a measure, advanced to where the pair stood,